If you want to participate, contact me at ordinarywomenpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure you have great projects to brag about. You can also follow me and message me on Instagram at ordinarywomenpodcast, on Twitter at ordinarywomenpc, or on Facebook on the page Ordinary Women. This episode mentions eating disorders. If this is a subject you're sensitive to, consider skipping some parts of this podcast or this entire episode. If you suffer from eating disorders, please reach out for help. You can talk to your GP. There are also some resources in the show notes. Hello everyone, welcome to Ordinary Women. Hi Laura, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi Lucy, thank you very much for having me.
I'm very happy to have this conversation with you. Can you start by presenting yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Laura Williamson. I'm 25 years old. I am an ordinary woman living in London, and I currently work for the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry.
Interesting. And can you tell us something unusual about you?
So my joints in my fingers are hyper flexible, so like I can bend it like the wrong way.
Okay, so no one can see.
No one can see. Terrible skill for a podcast, but it's a bit creepy, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Like basically, I don't even know how to explain. You can just bend your
like imagine bending it the right way, but it also goes the opposite way
around. That's amazing. I'd love to see that.
It was like handy for like ballet, cheerleading, you know, all those things I did.
Yeah. Since we talk here about being a woman, was there a time when you realized you are a woman?
I guess, in a sense, I was lucky that I have always felt like my gender matched the body that I was born with. Mm-hmm. So in that way, there was never a moment that I was like, oh, I'm a woman and this is what that is. Or, you know, like that wasn't really a breakthrough moment for me. I've always just been what I thought or I suppose what I was told I was. I think that there was definitely a moment where it dawned on me what it meant to be a woman. And it came back to me when I was listening to one of the previous podcasts. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, that's what happened to me. And I remember I was maybe like 11 years old, walking down the street, going to the shop for my mum to pick something up from the supermarket, and someone like catcalled out the window. And it was like the first time that had ever happened to me. And I was like, oh shit, like I'm becoming old enough now to be seen as like a sexual object. In my head, obviously it was not that articulate at the time. Like now I can see that that's what it meant. Which one? Absolutely horrific. I was 11 years old. Like I was literally a child. Horrifying. But it very much like stands out as like a memory of like, oh, like this is what it's like to be a woman.
Yeah, I think we were catcalled a lot more, well, I was at least between my 13th and my 18th, rather than now that I'm 25 and that I'm more a woman than a little girl, which is absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, no, I would agree. But also I think that there is a little bit of location in that, or at least for me, like when I go home to where I grew up, so I grew up in Derbyshire, and when I go home, and I went home a couple of weeks ago for like a week, and I got catcalled at home, and I haven't been catcalled in London for, you know, in so long, and then I was home for a week, and within that space I got catcalled multiple times. So I definitely think there's like a demographic or geographical difference in that behaviour for sure, or like it seemed very obvious to me.
Interesting.
Yeah. And like I looked awful at the point one of the catwalk. I laughed because I was like, are you blind? Literally. So I'd been for a run. I'd done about like 10 kilometers. I was like sweating. I was in like shorts. I'd slipped over in a cow pat in a field. I had like cow poo on my leg. And I was like, this is the point that you're choosing to catcall me? I was like, how desperate do you have to be to be shouting out your van window at a girl covered in cow poo? I just was like, I thought it was funny. Like, it's not funny, it's disgusting.
No,
people shouldn't do it. But it was also really quite hilarious. I was like, oh honey, get a life.
This conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's madness. That being said, I remember reading a few personal experiences of women talking about the fact that they get catcalled less if they're very dressed up. The better they're dressed and have makeup and stuff like that, the less they are catcalled.
Oh, really? Interesting. I would definitely say that the opposite is true in my life. Or at least, like, maybe not necessarily like catcalling, but certainly like in the way that people look at you on the tube. Oh my god. Like, they look at you like you're like a piece of meat that they just want to pick up and bite. And I'm just like sat there like,
Studies show as well that disabled women are the one who are being catcalled and sexually harassed the most.
I guess ultimately, like, they're doing it to the people who are most vulnerable because they're the people who they will get away with doing it to.
Yeah. And because it's always about domination. So as you say, they're easy.
Reason number 1,005,064 why we hate men.
And that's not about to change. Did you grow up with any feminine role model?
Yeah, I had quite a lot of feminine role models in my life, actually. I think, like, the obvious one, like my mum, my grandparents, my grandmas, but also, like, I have 3 older sisters. So in terms of female influence on my life, my sisters definitely were that, whether I wanted them to be or not. I had no choice. But yeah, no, so definitely, like, close family. I was very lucky to be surrounded by women, and surrounded by women who were not all on the same path, not all interested in the same things. Like, each one of us has different passions and different talents, and I guess I was quite lucky that I was surrounded by that. You know, you see some families and, like, everyone in the family is a doctor, or everyone in the family is a paleontologist or something. You know, like, everyone in my family has done something different, and I really like the fact that we have, and, like, how it's, you know, difference is very much celebrated.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That gives a bit of more representation only inside your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, you know, it was very much instilled into us, like, you work hard, and, like, but also, like, it's kind of funny actually, because my grandparents being from, like, older generations, my grandmas were pretty much stay-at-home mums. Like, they were homemakers. That was their role. They did other roles within that. So, you know, like, my dad's mum was a farmer's wife, so she would help with harvest, and they ran a farm shop and all that kind of stuff. So, like, you know, within being a mum, she was so many other things. And then my mum, having had children very young, was a stay-at-home mum until we were grown up, and, you know, she's gone on to do lots of other things now. But yeah, so, like, even though sort of our generations above us were mums and homemakers as their roles, we were all very much pushed to be career women. And I think that's actually, like, I kind of wonder why. Like, I would love to question, like, why they very much emphasise that school was so important and hobbies were so important. Yeah, maybe I have to go and ask.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of, like, other female role models, there was plenty of teachers I had who were influential on my life, my education. But I actually think there was, when I was thinking about the answer to this question, there was a character in a book that I used to read when I was younger, and it's a really random set of books. They're called Nellie the Monster Sitter. No one I have ever spoken to since has ever read them too, so I don't know where my parents found them from.
I don't know about that.
No. But it was basically this girl who was a babysitter to monsters. But, you know, like, she didn't care, like, how dangerous they looked, how scary they were, who they were, where they came from, all of that stuff. And I think, in a way, as a female role model, that sort of ability to treat everyone equally, be kind to everybody, to really not care what somebody looked like in the way that you respond to them, I think actually that was an incredibly important lesson that I learned from a character in a book. And she was also a girl, and she was, like, running a business as, like, a 7-year-old or whatever. Like, I was like, yeah, this girl's killing it.
Damn.
I'm gonna have to find these books and read them again, because I think they were great.
I would love to read them.
That's so funny. In fact, I think one, like, I even got one, like, signed by the author once. Like, I was, like, really into them, yeah.
And what do you think these women taught you?
I think they taught me the value of working hard, and I suppose, like, a stubbornness not to quit. Like, once you begin something, you see it through, for better or for worse. There was a running joke that if you didn't do your homework, this is actually quite bad, that if you didn't do your homework, you become a carrot picker on a rusty bike.
A what? A carrot picker on a rusty bike?
And I mean, like, there's a slight classism in that statement. But the message was that if you work hard, then you will be rewarded with a good job and nice things, you know, and I see where they were coming from with it, and it stuck with me clearly because I still remember it. But I think, yeah, within that message was just work hard, you know, like, your education is incredibly important, and that's ultimately what will get you through life. And yeah, I very much agree with that. So yeah, I think that was probably the most important thing they taught me. I also learned how to cook and how to bake from the female role models in my life. I'm surrounded by people who are incredible with food.
I am very grateful for that. Having lived with you, I thank them for that.
Yeah, no, like, I think definitely some of my best recipes are things that have either been, like, passed down or from, like, things that I've tried and tested by my sisters and stuff. So yeah, definitely my ability to cook, I think, comes from them for sure. Also, being sociable, that sort of confidence to go into a room of strangers and know how to hold yourself and I guess like respond to the people in the room. I mean, I don't know whether it was necessarily because they were women, but because we had such a big family and there was always social events and, you know, seeing how my mum and my grandmas and sisters navigated that and, you know, hosted a room of people. And I think that's definitely skills that I learned from them for sure.
So important. And actually, when you say that it was not necessarily because there were women, I think it's actually shown that usually it's a lot of women that do bear that social skills. Again, I would have to look at data here, but I'm quite sure we can find data on who thinks about birthdays in the husband's family. It's very often the wife who would think, it is your sister's birthday tomorrow.
Yeah.
Think about that, etc. We haven't seen your mum in a while. Let's organize a weekend with her. Things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is so unfair. Like,
you know what, actually, as well, so it was recently my mum's birthday and I was part of her like birthday party. We'd gone through all of like our old family photo albums to find like, pictures of her throughout her life. Honestly, there was some cracking photographs. It was so funny. But there was this recurring theme, because obviously like when we were growing up 20 years ago, people didn't have camera phones. Like you had a camera, a family camera, often it was on film, so you sort of saved the film for special moments, right? And so often that was birthdays or Christmas. So lots of the pictures focus around each sort of every child's birthday. There's like a selection of pictures. Me and my sister Jodie were laughing because there's like, okay, here are the children, here's one of like the candles being blown out on the cake, here's dad playing in the garden, and here's mum in the kitchen.
really?
And it was like this like recurring theme of like every party, and there was like all of these things happening, and there was a picture of mum in the kitchen, and like that's just where she was every party.
Oh, wow.
And you know, like in a sense, like she enjoys hosting, she enjoys cooking, she planned these things, and in that sense she was doing what she enjoyed. So I don't think it's like, oh gosh, she shouldn't have been in the kitchen, because that's where she enjoyed being, but also like it was funny.
Yeah. Especially if she was alone in the kitchen.
Generally a child with her, child on the hip.
Yeah.
But then she had 5 children, you know, she chose to be a homemaker, she chose to be a mum. So in that sense, like, it's not like, I think a big part of feminism is the joy of being able to choose.
Yeah. 100%.
And I think that like we have chosen really to be career people, you know, we're 25, we're working, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago at our age we would probably have been married with children, right? We've chosen a different path, but I think part of feminism is not looking down on the people that chose to go with that path. So, you know, we can notice these things, and it's funny to me that she was already in the kitchen, but it's not a bad thing. Like, she chose that role, she chose to be there. Yeah, I think that's always something sort of, as a career woman, I like remind myself of, like, when you see these girls that you go to school with and they're now like there with like 5 children or whatever, and I'm just like, oh my god, like, poor you. And I'm like, actually not poor you, like, you're doing what you want to do, and that's a wonderful thing, that we have the joy of choice. Yeah, that was a long ramble.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think it is important to remember and to say again and again that what is important is the choice.
Yeah, especially when other places in the world, even other places in the UK, financial situations and whatever mean that people don't have that choice.
Yeah.
So, you know, in that sense, we're incredibly lucky that we do.
Oh, we are, yeah.
I'm actually reading a book at the moment. It's called The Girl with the Louding Voice. And my mum bought it for me because she was like, you've always been the girl with the loud voice. Thanks, mum.
It is a compliment.
Yeah, I'm like, thanks, mum. Good. I'm heard when I go into a room. But it's about this young girl, she's like 14. She's in a rural village in Nigeria, and she gets married to an older man as his like 3rd wife, and then how she gets out of that situation, not necessarily it's a fantastic story. Yeah, highly recommend anyone to read it.
Thank you. I absolutely will.
It's like bright yellow as well, so it looks really fun on the bookshelf.
Love it. I just bought Sex and World Peace. It's about the fact that equal countries in terms of gender are also more peaceful, have better economies, like are globally better.
Of course they are. Global health was something I studied as part of my masters, and like so many projects, and the fundamental part of so many projects, whether it's you're working on like nutrition and malnutrition and feeding babies, you know, an important part of all of those projects is female education. It always comes back to female education, female empowerment, because if 50% of your population is uneducated and without power, then how can you expect your population to prosper? You can't. It's a foolish way to expect it. Yeah. So you can throw money at something, but unless the people receiving that money know what to do with it, it's never going to work.
And do you currently have a female role model, or more than one?
I have so many. Oh my gosh. I think there are so many wonderful women in my life. My family are still very much there and a present positive force. I think I have some incredible female friends. Yeah, like different friends from different parts of my life who all definitely have like a positive influence, and I look to and I listen. You know, I think I can learn a lot from everybody. There are people that I sort of aspire to on a more fickle level, you know, in terms of like, I don't know, maybe there's not. I know, I was thinking like celebrity culture. Are there people that I aspire to? There is no one that I aspire to be, because I'm quite happy being myself. I guess there are people that I enjoy the content they create, or that their like vivacity for life, things like that. And there are people that I work with, you know, who've done amazing things with their career, and I could only dream of having a career as successful as them. So yeah, like lots of different people are sort of a positive influence in who I look up to for a variety of different reasons.
Amazing. That's so important. So great that you still have a lot. And do you think that the lack of representation impacted you?
Oh, like definitely, and in probably in more ways than I could even identify. You know, on a sort of a policy level, you know, of course, there like a lack of women in parliament means that there is a lack of representation for women in policy and in the implementation of that in terms of education, you know, sex education, where is the education around female pleasure, things like that, you know. Only these kinds of things ultimately are going to come from females being in those top positions of power. And, you know, when you look at politics and you think, okay, what women are there or have been there, you think Margaret Thatcher, Theresa May and Priti Patel. I'm like, well, it's a pretty dire state up there, isn't it? Jesus Christ. So I think in that sense, there are probably lots of things that my life has been affected by in a way that I could never have controlled, or the close environment we could never have controlled, simply because women weren't in the positions that they should have been in, or still aren't. Yeah, so I think in that sense it definitely did. But I think in my day-to-day life, I very much have, you know, there is more women than men, 100%. Like in my family, in my friends, it's very female heavy, which I'm incredibly grateful for. Incredibly wonderfully female heavy. You know, the women that I'm surrounded by are great women, not just women. So in that sense, I don't think there was a lack of representation, because I was surrounded by feminine energy and all of that good stuff.
Cool. That's so important as well. All right. This is a time when we stop talking about other people and we talk about you and your own project.
My favourite thing to talk about.
Wow. Love it. Love the energy. That's what we want. So, about which project do you want to talk today?
I want to talk about Happy Belly Nutrition.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, what is this?
So it is my nutrition therapy business. So basically I studied nutrition for global health for my master's. I graduated that in like a full year ago. Wow. So I'm an accredited nutritionist, or accredited associate nutritionist. I am very, very passionate about improving or helping people to improve their relationship with food. I think diet culture is so entrenched into our lives that we don't even realise the way that it affects us. And I think once I started to dissect that, I realised how much time I spent and how much energy was spent on analysing the food I was eating, my body, the reasons why I was exercising, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't think I realised how affected I was by it until I started to sort of dissect it in myself, and then dissect it on sort of a wider sort of societal level. And yeah, so then I sort of really became passionate about helping people navigate that and basically put the finger up to diet culture, because it's not a positive thing in any possible way. And, you know, people and the media and society will tell you that, you know, obesity is a epidemic and it's, you know, causing these £1 million worth of NHS money and deaths. And yes, there are medical implications being a certain size, but it's not a one size fits all model. And that's unfortunately the way that healthcare views it. And health at every size is something I'm really passionate about. And yeah, just sort of helping to break down those ridiculous rules and ridiculous ways of perceiving ourselves as a result of diet culture. And so yeah, so basically when it was locked down and I was doing my masters, I started to just like share some pictures of like food and stuff. Like I love to cook, I love to eat. So yeah, just sort of started doing that and sharing some messages about basic nutrition, you know, nutrient values and what vitamins are essential and things like that, and making it a bit more easily understandable, because, you know, I am a scientist, my undergrad degree is in biology, so I think I forget sometimes that nutrition as a science can be complicated to people who don't don't have that science background or science brain, you know, it is a certain way of thinking about things. So yeah, just trying to make it like a easily digestible thing for people to understand and use in their day-to-day lives. So yeah, so I started doing it on Instagram and then graduated, became accredited, and then yeah, so it's basically developed my own 10-week program. And I kind of hate the way that it sounds, because it sounds like one of those like, oh, sign up for a 10-week program and lose 10 pounds, and then it makes me want to vomit. It's definitely like not like that. But it essentially is like 10 weeks of education to help people understand basic nutrition and how to navigate that world and try to start helping to improve relationships with food. So that's like my current like passion project. There are lots of like things that I want to do with it that I don't necessarily have the time to do with it that I want to do, but ultimately that's my like biggest passion and biggest thing at the moment, for sure.
You sound passionate. That's so incredible. I love it. As you were saying, it is so important. Actually, there is one anti-diet culture influencer that I follow, and I think I'll tell you about that, but once she posted some statistics about diet culture, how it is just basically $1 billion industry. And I think she was saying, if I remember correctly, she was saying that in the UK, a woman in her life will spend on average about $25,000 in diet, in trying to lose some weight, and will lose about 10 times, I think, her weight in her life because of the yo-yo and stuff like that.
It is madness. And you say like the yo-yo thing, I think it's like 95% of people will put on the same, if not more, weight than they lost during their diet, because no diet is sustainable. And that's why, like, you know, there are even these diets that sell themselves as a lifestyle. And so ridiculous, because ultimately lifestyle comes from within. It comes from that education. Going back to female education, it's all about education. It's all about that deeper understanding, and not just like being like, what is the here and now, and thinking about nutritional health as a long-term, you know, what you eat now affects your life forever, right? Because like what you're putting into your body and how you're treating it, you can't put water into a car and expect it to run. You have to fuel it properly, and you have, you know, you can't just put fuel into a car. You have to also put some windscreen wiper cleaning fluid in, and you have to pump up the tires sometimes. It's like all of those extra things. It's like our bodies don't just run on the bare necessity, and that's why, you know, people are unhappy and people are, you know, shrinking themselves, and they don't find happiness when they're smaller, because happiness doesn't come from a different body. Happiness comes from inside, and happiness comes from freedom of diet culture. So yeah, it makes me very angry. But it also, you know, like I remember diet culture affected me from being a very small child, like always feeling bigger than my sisters and my friends at school, not really enjoying exercise because I felt like I noticed that my legs wobbled more than other people in my class and things like that. And like now it's just absolute bullshit, you know, like my legs wobble because they're incredibly strong, and like I couldn't be training for a triathlon if my legs weren't able to wobble, and I know that now. And where was I going at this point? Can't really remember. But actually, we've talked a lot about feminism, like we always do when we're together. But diet culture and the need to make women smaller is very much a feminism issue, and very much stems from, you know, if you make women focus on being smaller, not having enough energy to do what they want to do, always needing to compare themselves and put their time, their energy, their brain power, you know, into their appearance and not into learning maths, then in a way you can control them. And it's always been about shrinking women and making them lesser and taking up less space. It's very much a feminist issue. Who was it? There was an incredible podcast I was listening to by like a food anthropologist. I'm going to find it for you because it was so good. And she was dissecting the feminist issues around diet culture and about it through history. And it was fascinating.
So interesting. Yeah, I was about to say the same. A so-called beautiful woman, if we go by the standards, is a powerless woman. And it's the same about the way actually we see and stuff like that, you know, like men spread, you know, or as women, for instance, we cross our legs, stuff like that, because we're trying to take up less space.
Yeah, like when you're on the tube and a man has his legs like all the way out, and you have to like squeeze in beside him, keep your legs together. But yeah, it very much is about men taking up more space and women having to make themselves smaller. But also, like you said about the beauty standards, they're also not just sexist, but they're incredibly racist. You know, like the need to be small and not have curves, have that sort of 90s straight style body is definitely racist in terms of, you know, naturally body types are different between different countries, and European facial features are seen as what's beautiful. So yeah, it's all a load of bullshit.
Yeah, and it's very classist as well. If you look at the beauty standards across centuries, you can see that it's always, the beauty standards are rich people. Like, for instance, in the Middle Age in Europe, people who are very white would be considered as beautiful because people who were working in the fields would get more tanned, whereas when you're at the castle. And same as back then, you'd be considered beautiful if you were bigger, because that meant that you could afford food, basically. You were rich enough to have a lot of food. Whereas now, you're more beautiful if you're maybe a bit tan. Again, putting that in the spectrum of racism, which obviously isn't the case because we do live in racist countries.
But then also on that, like, it's really interesting, lots of Asian countries, like, skin lightening creams are hugely popular because it's seen as beautiful to be paler. It's all just mad. It really is madness. And, like, how is beauty a trend? You know, like, before, like, I don't know, when we were, 15? If you had freckles, you covered them with foundation. It was not cool to have freckles. And now you can buy freckle pens. And you just have, like, how absurd it is that we just always have to change ourselves. Like, how much energy, money, time are we putting into these things that
you can never win.
Like,
You'll
just don't mean anything either.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't mean anything. And it's been so freeing to really begin not to care and to find taking it back to nutrition and to health, like focusing on my personal health, my personal nutrition, my relationship with food and exercise for me, and not for any reason other than for what makes me feel good, not because I want to be smaller or be musclier or be anything else that society is telling me I need to be. I remembered my point.
Please go on now. Now I can make a good editing.
So, because I was thinking back to, like, when diet culture started to affect me, and I was saying it affected me from being really small as a child. Right. But then it really, like, kicked in when I got to being, like, 16. And that's when, like, I started to go to the gym and started to really be, like, in inverted commas here, like, be careful with what I was eating. Because I don't think there's a way to be careful. There's no unsafe way to eat unless eating, like, mouldy food.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, don't eat past, like, you know, if it smells foul milk, don't eat it. But other than that, you're probably good to go. But yeah, that's when it really, like, kicked in. And I think now that's, 10 years ago? For 10 years, not 10 years, because I feel like I've been free from the influence of diet culture for a few years now, or as much as, you know, it's a continuous process. But yeah, like, such a significant chunk of my life was spent obsessing over what I looked like. And, like, I could have put that energy into so many other things. I think I could have learned a language in that time.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have, but I could have.
Watch more Netflix series.
Yeah, far more likely.
And why did you start the project?
Just because of my passion for the topic, and because in my head what this project will become is what I wish I had had. You know, like, I want to do more nutritional therapy sessions, like one-to-one, but also, like, work out a way to make it almost like corporate training, take it to, like, businesses and have it as part of their, like, wellness programs, because I know that as part of, like, corporate responsibility, lots of them do that now. So I would love to do that. I want to write a book. The big thing for me would be to publish a book about it.
Oh, a lot of projects to come. I'll have to re-invite you in a few years to talk more. Nice. But about this one, what makes you very proud of yourself?
I am confident that the work that I'm doing is actually having a tangible benefit to people, you know, from, like, the feedback that I get and from, like, seeing the way that they change and the way that they talk about food and nutrition changes over time. I can see that it does work and it does make a difference, and a positive difference. And I think, like, so many people, especially in London, are so, like, motivated by the hustle, motivated by money, motivated by, you know, like, and that's not a bad thing. Like, you do you, hun. Like, if that's what gets you going, then go for it. But that's never been what's motivated me, and ultimately what motivates me to work hard is knowing that what I'm doing is making a difference. And so I think, like, I'm very proud of what this is and what this could become, because I know that it can make a difference.
Definitely.
So many women are affected. I mean, and men. You know, nutrition and diet culture does not just apply to women. Historically, and I suppose the majority does focus at women, and, you know, like we've said about making us smaller, but men especially, and I think it's increasingly, men are affected by it, and especially in terms of that, you know, men have to be tall and muscular, and they have to go to the gym, and they have to be able to bench press however many kilograms, and all of this ridiculous stuff, and, you know, it does affect them, and it is having an impact on their mental health, you know, and I think that's probably part of why suicide rates are so high in men is because there are these incredible pressures to be manly, masculine, and a big part of that is bodies. And, you know, health-wise, heart disease affects men and women.
Yeah.
And a huge factor in developing heart disease is diet. So, you know, it's like you can't say that diet isn't important to men. So it definitely is. It definitely applies to everybody, regardless of sex or gender. I think hopefully I can help everybody. I'd love to help everyone in the world.
I'm sure you will do whatever you want to do. And how long was there between the time you first thought of it and the time you actually launched it?
Probably like a few hours.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you should know about me, Lucy, I don't faff around. I sometimes don't think things through properly either, which is,
really?
you know, no, it's fine. In terms of nutrition as like what I wanted to study and a sort of life passion, I had been interested in food and nutrition from being young. Whether that came from a positive place or not, it was an interest. And then I think it was probably second year of uni, doing biology, so like science, and just like, you know, sort of refining what I was actually interested in. And I think that was at the point where I decided that I wanted to do nutrition. And I found like a little letter that I'd written to myself from like the end of second year. I mean, there were some hilarious stories in there of like things I forgot I had done. I was like, oh my God, you were outrageous. But one of the things in there was like, I think I've decided that after this degree, like I want to go on to study nutrition. And then I found this letter like a couple of months ago, and I was so proud of myself. I was there like, oh, like I did it, you know, like I set my mind to something and I did it, and I was so proud of that. So yeah, so I think like that was probably the point where I decided that it was a passion enough to continue in my career with. And then I took some time after uni, then did my masters, and then it was whilst I was doing my masters and we went into lockdown that I got bored enough to set up an Instagram in the name of Happy Belly Blog, and that's when everything kind of came from there, really.
Since
in a way a few years, and in a way a day.
Yeah. Since there was not much time between the time you started to think about it and the time you actually started it, did you think about what you might see as challenging or what you might think would be easy? Or
I think at that point, no, because it really was just a boredom project at that point. Like when I started it, it was something to fill the time of being in lockdown, and I was filling it with cooking. And so yeah, at that point, it was just for fun. Like it was just a way of almost like consolidating what I was learning in my master's degree, having some fun, taking some pictures, eating some good food. And that's all it was. So I don't think I really thought about that. Now when I think about like what I want to do with that particular project, but also what I want to do with other things in my life. So sort of the next big goal really is to do my PhD, and I want to do that in sustainable food systems. And that obviously ties into nutrition, but isn't directly this particular project, Happy Belly Nutrition. So yes, I think like now from sort of looking at it as like a wider sort of life plan, obviously there are challenges in terms of like how do you keep everything going at the same time, how do you financially navigate that, all of those kinds of things. How do you run a business? Like I don't really know how to run a business. And that's why, you know, currently my business, I put in inverted commas, is not really, but it is very small, and that's because that's what I can handle at the moment whilst I have a full-time job, you know. So yeah, in that sense, like I see that there are challenges, but also like life is an adventure. You just got to go with the flow, see what happens. Like there's no point in planning it out because it won't happen that way anyway. So what's the point? I didn't see my life being like it is and where I am now a year ago, like at all.
Yeah.
So we'll just see what happens, see what challenges pop up along the way.
And have you had any challenges to face yet?
I mean, I've kept it pretty low key because I don't have a huge amount of spare time to invest in it to sort of grow it and therefore find the challenges. I suppose in a way like maybe that in itself is a challenge, the time to dedicate to it in maybe the way that I would want to, but I just don't really stress about it.
Yeah.
What will happen, you know? Like if it blows up, it blows up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like I enjoy doing it either way. And I think that's like a super important thing for me is like I would never want to push it, you know, push the Happy Belly Nutrition or push doing a PhD or push the job that I do now. Like I wouldn't want to do any of those things to the point of not enjoying them. Like I enjoy everything. Yeah, and I think that's again like another motivation for me and my work is enjoyment from it. So yeah, I wouldn't want to let that get lost in the progression.
Wise words. And was there on the contrary something that was easier than you thought would be?
You know what, actually, like coming up with the concept and the plan, like the 10-week plan, like it very much came easily, and I suppose having the education that I've had meant making the resources and knowing what to put into it was already in my brain. But yeah, like things like the actual content and like thinking about writing a book, I know what I want to put in the book. There are a few pages written already. But like, yeah, like I think in like content wise, like I know what I want to say and I have the evidence to back it up. That's maybe easier than it sounds like it would be.
Was there any important figure that helped you, like someone that played an important role in this project so far?
Myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's very much like I wanted to do it and I did it.
Yeah.
I don't really think anyone had that much of an influence on me picking to do it, really, other than, yeah, just me. That's again like the egotistical answer, isn't it? Like, of course there were influences along the way, but yeah, I mean, like my passion for nutrition, I suppose, stemmed from one of my friends who was quite poorly with an eating disorder, and I think that really solidified in my brain the need to help people navigate diet culture to prevent it. You know, there were other things happening, of course, but I think diet culture does lead to a lot of eating disorders, and if I can prevent that, and like ultimately, like she was the person who opened my eyes to that, so I guess in that sense, like she was quite an influence on this being like a important passion project in my life.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I can't say that's nice to hear because it's not.
No.
It's really, really
I mean, what is nice to hear is like she is recovered and living a great life now, so like
that's
it's all
amazing.
good.
I'm so happy for her and congratulations,
Yeah.
because it is very difficult, and yeah, congratulations to her. Well, we're reaching the end of this podcast. I think asked all the questions I wanted to ask, but maybe you have something to add.
I don't think so. I think we've fully explored my life right now.
Yeah, really liked it. Really enjoyed talking about this. Yeah, I think it was very interesting, and I'm very happy that we talked about diet culture so much because it is important.
But I think it's so interlinked with so many other things, you know, sexism, racism, classism, you know, it all affects us, and it's naive of people to think that just touching on one of those things is going to be a cure. We need, like you were saying earlier, like we need that representation at a high level to really have sort of a domino effect coming down and actually having tangible effects on people's day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and we need intersectionality between all these domains.
For sure, yeah, like instead of like having a siloed approach, it needs to be like, across it all.
Well, thank you so much for such a great discussion. It was very, very, very interesting. And as the guests of the podcast, you have the very last words.
Wow. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. My last words are, always remember that you and only you get to define who you are, what you do, and your own worth.